What's up, guys? It's Dan from Coin Bureau Trading, back at it again with another crypto market update. Today, we're going to take a look at the things that you guys need to be watching in the next few days and why we will probably see a continued recovery in Bitcoin and in altcoins. If this is the kind of content that you enjoy, then be sure to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ping that notification bell. Before we get started, do keep in mind that nothing in this video is financial advice. It's just my personal analysis of the crypto market. Your analysis could be different, and if it is, that's awesome, because the more difference of opinion that we have, the better traders and the better investors we're all going to become. So I want to get started, guys. I guess first things first is I'll say, my last video was last Thursday. I said the next 48 hours would be crazy, and they were actually very crazy. And I guess the good news is that things kind of resolved to the positive, let's say. Of course, there was lots of drama around Elon and whatever, but the main thing to watch now, that's the past. That's from a few days ago. We have to focus on what lies ahead. And of course, as some of you may have heard, that the US and China will be meeting in London today, literally today on Monday, to discuss the trade talks. And hopefully, some of you guys might remember last time this happened, it was in Switzerland a few weeks back. And after those trade talks, the markets rallied a lot, especially risk assets like altcoins. For those of you who haven't noticed, the reason why altcoins have struggled so much, the reason why other risk assets like small cap stocks have struggled so much, has primarily to do with the uncertainty around tariffs, especially between the US and China. So if we get positive news out of these talks later today, then you can expect to see the markets head higher, with altcoins and small cap stocks outperforming large cap stocks in this case. But the other thing to keep in mind, of course, is that there is a risk that these talks could go very badly, and in which case you would see the opposite scenario. But it does look like, it's in the interest of the US and China to have these things wrapped up pretty quickly. The Chinese economy seems to be slowing quite a bit. In Trump's case, he seems to be starting to catch a lot of strays, let's say, from people in his administration. People are not really happy. They want these tariffs, the tariff uncertainty, just to get wrapped up. They don't, at this stage, I don't think people care if it's going to be 10% or 15% or whatever. Just get it finished and get it on paper, or some kind of, agreement of an agreement, announcement of an announcement, the stuff you hear in crypto. And in all seriousness, I do think that this is likely to be a bullish catalyst for the crypto market. And again, I think that if it does turn out to be bullish, which again I think is the most likely outcome, then it's going to be very bullish for altcoins and for small cap stocks. And of course, the other thing to watch here later in the week is that we're going to be getting a CPI print for May. That's going to be coming out on Wednesday. And what's really interesting is that the markets are actually pricing in that inflation rose in May, which is interesting because I'm not so sure that's the case. And in either case, it kind of sets the stage for a downside surprise. So the previous CPI print here you could see was 2.3%, and the markets right now they're expecting an average of somewhere around 2.5%. So if it comes in again at 2.3 or 2.4 or even at like 2.2 or something, to be honest, I'm not really sure which way it's going to go, but I think that it's probably going to come below what the markets are expecting. And if it does, then that's of course going to be very bullish for the markets, and especially for crypto and especially for altcoins. And I'll show you guys one chart you need to be watching when it comes to altcoins in the next couple of weeks. But first things first, let's take a look at Bitcoin. As you guys can see here, I have the Bollinger Bands, my favorite indicators, the only ones I think you need. Looking at the Bollinger Bands here, we can see that, that video I did last week, that wow, yeah, the price action was pretty crazy. Actually, here, let's zoom into the 4 hour just to get a closer look here. So this was basically the price action during that period that we saw a little bit of kind of like a fake out. And I'm sure you saw many people on social media, many traders saying, it's down, it's over, it's going to fall to 93K or whatever, which, to be honest, it is possible. If you zoom out here to the weekly chart for Bitcoin, you can see that Bitcoin could fall as low as 93K to the Bollinger Band moving average on the weekly, and then it would probably bounce from that level and keep heading higher. But again, on the shorter term time frame, it's still too soon to say that we're going to see a rollover. All we saw here was kind of like like a little bit of a fake out, retrace back up to the Bollinger Band moving average here on the daily for Bitcoin to continue a kind of like a bullish, recovery, I guess, or whatever term you want to use. Then we do need to see Bitcoin get above the Bollinger Band moving average on the daily, which is currently around 106.5 thousand, roughly speaking. And if it's not able to get above that level, then yes, the next one to watch would potentially be the Bollinger Band moving average on the weekly. But the one thing that a lot of people forget, guys, and this is, I think, another common mistake, I guess, to giving a shout out to my video on Saturday, another very common mistake among traders is that if prices are trading sideways, in terms of resetting momentum and resetting sentiment or whatever, prices trading sideways are equivalent to a dip. This is something I remember hearing. I think it was Dale Pinkert or one of these pro trader guys who've been doing this for a long time. Is that you just always have to remember, if prices trade sideways for a prolonged period, that's basically the same as a dip. And of course, in terms of momentum indicators and stuff like RSI, people will say, oh, but I can see the RSI is falling and the price is if the price is going up a little bit, then it creates like a divergence or whatever, which is why I don't really use the RSI too much on shorter term timeframes. But anyways, for Bitcoin to be kind of chopping sideways for the next, like for the rest of the week, basically, that would be the equivalent of essentially as if Bitcoin had gone a little bit lower, let's say below 100K. And the last thing I want to mention, just to underscore the fact that it's possible that the Bitcoin has already kind of bottomed here, which I'm sure is something, again, that many of you are wondering, has Bitcoin bottomed here and is it going to continue heading higher? On the shorter term time frame here, on the 4 hour, it does look like it's potentially going to squeeze again to the upside, or it could squeeze to the downside, of course. But I would defer here to kind of other traders that have been around in the game for a lot longer. Bob Lucas is one that I follow personally, and he basically called the other day that he thinks that the drop down to around 100K or whatever it was back here, yeah, this drop down to whatever it was, yeah, 104, 100K point four or whatever, the drop down to that level was probably the beginning of a new 60-day cycle, and we're basically going to see prices melting up into the end of the month, which is also what I expect. That being said, I think that this week could be a little bit choppy again because we have stuff around China, stuff around CPI. Maybe the CPI does come in higher than expected and people start freaking out a little bit. So maybe this week will be a little bit choppy, but I do think that going into the second half of the month, we're going to see a pretty substantial rally. And of course, for the time being, it's going to be focused on Bitcoin, but we'll come to altcoins in a second. First, I need to, of course, show the Coin Bureau deals page. In case you didn't notice, we were using Binance there. The Coin Bureau deals page has a 20% trading fee discount and up to $600 of bonuses on Binance. It's the biggest deal that you can get. Taking advantage of this deal is super simple. Just click the link in the description or in the comments. It'll take you to a page that looks like this. Enter your email or phone number. It takes 2 minutes to sign up. If you can't sign up for Binance for whatever reason, then do check out the other deals we have here, like Arkham Exchange, which is available to US users. And we do have other exchanges that are available to users in jurisdictions who might have a hard time accessing Binance. When you take advantage of these deals, it does help us out. It helps out the exchange and it helps you out. So it's a win-win-win for everyone. This brings me to, of course, the moment you've all been waiting for. What about altcoins? What about altcoins? Tell me about altcoins, right? So this is a chart I think I might have covered a couple of weeks back. This is the US dollar index, or DXY. We're looking at it on the weekly here, and you might be wondering, why is the US dollar index so important? And that's that in all, I guess, well, not all, but in the most recent previous cycles back in 2021 and also in 2017, you can see that there was a massive drop in the DXY. And then towards the end, kind of like when we would get that second leg lower, like back here, you can see that there was a drop in early 2017. And then when there was that kind of like second leg lower that was starting, then that's when you really saw altcoins take off. And you see a similar kind of situation here where there was, you could make the argument there was a second leg lower in early 2021 or whatever. But as you guys can see, and again, maybe I'll actually cancel out here the drawings just so you guys can see a little bit clearer as to what I'm talking about. So basically what I think is happening right now, so you see this little thing right here, and again, we're on the weekly here, so this is not stuff that happens overnight. So we have this, we have this, and then of course we have this. So this is what I think we're seeing right now for the DXY. And again, like when you see that second leg lower, this is what I'm talking about. When you see that second leg lower, that's when altcoins really take off. And as you can see, it looks like the DXY is about to have that second leg lower. And I do think it's going to fall down to, I don't know, around 95, 96. I'm not a Forex trader, so like don't be like trading Forex or anything based on this analysis. But again, based on my analysis here, I do think that we're about to see a second leg lower, and as soon as that second leg lower starts, then you tend to see altcoins massively outperform. And again, this happens over the course of a few weeks, and I do think that this is foreshadowing again in the second half of this month, maybe into July. Maybe we see a little bit of like a recovery here in the DXY before it rolls over. It could always chop around for another couple of weeks before it rolls over, but basically within the next, let's say, 2 to 4 weeks, we should see the DXY roll over, and that should correspond to a massive rally in altcoins. Very useful chart to watch, and notably, this is one that is, I would say, the most important of like the macro charts, because if you look at like interest rates and even like stuff like QE or whatever, this does not really correspond that nicely to previous cycles. The Fed was raising interest rates and doing QE in 2017, and altcoins still rallied. But again, the one kind of macro chart that does kind of have a strong correlation to altcoin season is this US dollar index chart. Again, we're here on the weekly. Nice little trend line here that I've been watching. Is that trend line correct? Who knows? I'm not a Forex trader, but all I know is that I'm looking at this chart and seeing basically the exact same kind of like consolidation before second leg lower that translates to an altcoin season, which of course you might be wondering, okay, but then what's the catalyst? What would call the DXY to roll over? And I think, if it's not the CPI, then it could be the Fed's meeting here in June, which of course is on June 18th. So that's in about 10 days time, 9 days time. And what I think is probably going to happen, maybe the Fed, well, I guess first things first is that when you see this little asterisk here, we're looking at the Fed's official calendar. This little asterisk means that they're going to be putting out a summary of economic projections, which basically they're going to be, I guess, foreshadowing what they're going to do in the future. So even if the Fed doesn't cut rates or anything at the June meeting, if they pencil in and say, yeah, we're still planning on doing cuts, and maybe they're even going to stop their QT completely, because now they're just doing a little bit, I think like $5 billion a month. If they say we're stopping QT completely and we're going to still do rate cuts in the future, that'll be kind of dovish enough that it would cause the DXY probably to roll over, because of course the DXY is just being measured against the euro and the yen primarily, like its basket of currencies. The European Central Bank seems to have finished its rate cutting cycle, and of course the Bank of Japan is trying to like raise rates, which is of course that's a whole other topic. With the European Central Bank basically done cutting rates, and with the Bank of Japan wanting to raise rates, then of course the only thing that's kind of left here in this equation is for the Fed to kind of ease a little bit, and of course that would cause weakness in the DXY. The euro should not weaken anymore here versus the US dollar, which means that the euro is going to be strong, which means that the US dollar should go down. And again, in the case of Japan, the BOJ is kind of like under extreme pressure to raise rates, which again, the BOJ doesn't necessarily have to do anything. They could just sit on their hands, and if the Fed just says, yeah, we're going to be a little bit more dovish here, just even slightly, that'll be enough to bring the DXY down here, I think, to this 95, 94 level. And again, hopefully that won't be caused by something like some issues with trade. But again, I guess just to summarize is that later today we could get some bullish news either today or tomorrow. I mean, who knows how quickly they'll announce this stuff after the London talks. It'll probably be similar to what we saw in Switzerland last month, which of course resulted in a big rally. Later this week we have CPI coming in, which I personally think is going to come in a little bit lower than expected. Bitcoin, is still a little bit on like shaky ground, but it's really just been chopping basically over the last couple of weeks here. And analysis from let's say more seasoned traders suggests that it's possible that Bitcoin has already bottomed here somewhere around 100K and is probably going to continue heading higher. Does that mean does that mean it's just going to be up only? Probably not. Maybe it could still, fall back down. It could even like theoretically retest at like 100K level, maybe fall just below and then continue heading higher. But I think that the chances of it falling all the way back down to 93K, although possible, is not very likely, I don't think. And then of course, again, with altcoins, just be watching primarily this DXY. And again, this is something that will probably start rolling over in the next couple of weeks here. And that will, of course, translate, historically speaking, that translates to a massive rally in altcoins. Anyways, guys, if you did make it this far and you did find that information helpful, then be sure to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, ping that notification bell, and I'll see you in the next one.